Okay, we're going to make a start. So hello everyone and welcome to the European Smart Work Network meeting. I'm Ben Hutchinson and I'll be facilitating today's session, and our co-hosts, of course, Philip Van Hoot and Andy Lake, as always. In just a moment, I'm going to hand over to our first presenter, David Williams. Now, David is Microsoft's EMEA Smart Buildings Industry Lead, and he'll talk to us about the future of smart buildings. We've then got Jack Harvey-Clark, CEO of Apex Acoustics, and he's going to talk to us about best practice in acoustics and how you set out your workplace. And finally, we're really honoured to have our ringer Axel Springer presenter back with us, which is lovely. She's going to talk to us around their communications events as the global communications lead. How have they coped with the pandemic, people being locked down? How have they injected that sense of energy into their corporate events, despite people being in remote locations? So I'm going to start off, though, as I said, with David from Microsoft. So David, if you're ready, you can start presenting now. If I can ask everyone else to turn videos and webcams off for now, please, until called up. If you have any questions during the presentation, do add them to the chat and we'll make sure we cover those at some point during the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ben, can you just confirm that you can see my first slide?
Perfect. Yeah, we can.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Hey, thank you everybody for inviting me on this call. Yeah, delighted to have an opportunity to talk about what Microsoft's doing around smart buildings and places, and particularly focusing on making them smarter, sustainable, and of course, healthy. As Ben said, my name's David Williams. I live in the UK, but I'm actually in a global role. So I report into our corporate headquarters in Redmond, where I'm a smart industries building lead, the other way around maybe, a smart buildings industry lead. What that means is that I write the vision and strategy for Microsoft around our smart building strategies. And I also am responsible for working with our partner ecosystem and educating people within Microsoft. So a little bit by the way of background, really quickly, just to be clear what we're seeing in the market, really just as a level set to check. You know, without doubt, the number one business driver I'm seeing now is sustainability. You know, I've been working around smart buildings for only 5 years, which makes me quite a junior, I'm sure, compared to many on the call. But this has been a significant change. There is no doubt that 3 or 4 years ago, reduced costs was the number one. Now, sustainability is the number one thing that my customers talk to me and want to talk to me about. Reduced costs, of course, is still there. And of course, there's a relationship between sustainability and reduced costs. Workplace, this has also advanced, I think it's fair to say, particularly around healthy workspaces, which I will talk about clearly as part of this, part of the presentation. But also, when you think about workplaces, and particularly in the environment maybe of offices, you know, we've really got to work harder about making our offices places people actually want to work in. And that's not just providing, you know, a nice environment, but it's also providing a healthy environment. It's providing an environment that actually entices people back from their home. You know, people have got so used to kind of working remotely that you know, it's up to us to attract our employees back to the office. You know, the idea of turning around to people and saying, you have to be in the office. Seriously, do you want to work for a company like that? Nah. A company that says, hey, come and work in the office because we've got all these this is a really great place to work. We've got all the technology you need. We've got a great cafeteria, we've got great restaurants. You'll meet all your mates there. Hey, that suddenly sounds far more attractive. And last but by no means least, brand is still important, but I've seen a real change in brand. You know, I'm not saying there aren't companies out there that love to have their, you know, palaces of Versailles, their big golden towers with maybe Trump written across the top. But actually, brand increasingly these days, I'm finding is actually linked to the number one, which is sustainability. Working in higher and further education, for example, there's no doubt that students are looking at the the credentials of the university they're choosing to go to, not just because it's a beautiful building and it's historic or whatever, but actually around their sustainability credentials. Now, if I look at particularly going into the healthy side of buildings, for those of you that are looking for a framework, I would just recommend the Harvard School of Public Health framework. I mean, I've worked with these guys, they're good people, they really know their stuff. And as you'd expect, you know, if you use this framework, it's really backed up with academic research, so you can be utterly confident. So if you are scrabbling around slightly to kind of think, well, you know, what is a healthy building and how do I think about it? then I really would recommend this foundation as a great starting point. There's great great literature about it, and the good thing is it's all free on 4health.org. So yeah, really a really good area. Now, the thing that we have found is, what has the pandemic really changed? Do you know, if I'm being honest, not a lot, really. What it's done is it's accelerated trends we were already seeing in the smart buildings industry. We are seeing that obviously people are looking to work in hybrid situations, so ability to work away from their main office, again, predominantly in an office environment situation. But they were trends that were happening already, you know, providing people with proper tools that actually enables them to work from home or from places away from the office. That was happening already, but clearly the pandemic has accelerated that. Hey, you'd be disappointed if I didn't talk about technology working for Microsoft. When I was asked to kind of take over this industry with my fellow members of my team, you know, we were really challenged to think, well, okay, what are Microsoft going to bring to the party here? You know, we're not building experts. We're not going to pretend to be building experts. We're not construction experts. But of course, you know, we fall back on the technologies, and what we really were looking at, we were thinking, okay, so what advances in technology now enables Microsoft to have you know, a viewpoint, a position, a vision around smart places and smart buildings, around how do you make them smart, how do you make them sustainable, how do you make them healthy? And really, we've seen this kind of escalation of technologies. You know, first of all, public cloud technology in simple terms gives you, you know, that lowers the threshold. It lowers the initial hurdle to get in, because, you know, you only pay for what you use. You don't have to set up historically, you know, like you would have done loads of servers. You can just use public cloud. Clearly, the Internet of Things, the ability to get data out of buildings securely, and that is the key word, securely. You know, the whole Internet of Things and the ability to get that data is absolutely key. And then another change we've seen and around the technologies we're developing is around this idea of the edge. You know, the idea that, in fact, you know, it doesn't make sense to put all your data into the public cloud. It does make sense to keep some of your data on your premises. And increasingly with edge connectors and edge network devices, there's so much intelligence in those devices now. You know, it's no longer a tight case where you kind of network from an old PC on your on-premise. You know, these are really smart devices that make intelligent decisions about what data needs to remain on premise. For example, if you're running an elevator or a lift in English, you know, you need that data there and then. You can't wait for it to bounce back and forth. But if you're analyzing data over a period of time, then of course you want to take the advantage of cloud and the you know, ability of scale and the compute capability you've got. Artificial intelligence, everyone's talking about it. Is it real? Yes, it is. But only in certain areas I'm seeing at the moment, particularly around predictive maintenance, particularly around machine learning, the ability to collect data from many, many different devices and to be able to start identifying when things fail before they fail catastrophically. That's an enormous cost savings. And finally, digital twins. They've been around for ages, but really what we've tried to do with digital twins is enable our partners to build digital twins much more quickly. And I'll talk about those in a minute. Microsoft, what do we do? Like I said, we're not a building company, we're not a construction company, but we are experts in data and we're experts in digital transformation, and we kind of know our place. We know what we bring to the market. We're very confident about what we bring to the market, but we are not in any way pretending that we're anything that we're not. What we're excellent at is collecting data, analyzing data securely, safely, helping our customers really get the benefits from their data, turning it into information. And the other thing is, from a bigger strategic point of view, is this concept of digital transformation, really helping companies understand how digital technologies can help them be better at what they do. In very simple terms, you know, you've kind of got, when you look at a building, trying to make it more real now, if you're looking at a building, what are you actually talking about? And just from a framework perspective, it helps to kind of think of, you know, base level, the building, middle layer, what's happening in the building, and the top layer, how people interact with the building. And this is the kind of framework we've developed. You'll recognize it if you've seen the McKinsey model. But what's that mean in practice? So in practice, these are the scenarios that we end up talking to our customers most about. And you can see that I've starred the ones that we always talk about. We always talk about building management systems, the application of artificial intelligence, etc. How can you do predictive maintenance? How can you do better monitoring and control? Energy management, clearly, healthy buildings, access control, the whole thing about space utilization, from booking rooms to actually collecting that data over a period of time to understand how your space is being used and how you can optimize the space or maybe get rid of space. And then you're talking about, on the right hand side, the interaction of the human beings, the smart lobby, going to a lobby as a visitor. Is it really acceptable for your visitors, your customers, your potential employees to turn up at your lobby and stand there waiting for someone to speak to them? What's it say about your company? It says, well, I don't really care about you much. Yeah, you can just sort of stand there in a queue for a while. We'll come and see you eventually. We're filtering. No, that's completely unacceptable. Frankly, if I was going for a job at a company like that, and that's the feeling I got, it would make me question whether I really wanted to work for that organization. So, really simple view of IoT. Things, insights, actions, but we all know it's a lot more complicated than that. So what is Microsoft doing to try and simplify the whole end-to-end solutions around smart building? How do we help collect the information of the things that are happening? How do we help get the insights from that data? And then how do we help visualize and help people actually get actions out of that? Well, there's a couple of platforms I want to just talk to you about, just to show you about the way we're thinking about things, not as a sales pitch, because I'm no good at that. It's all to do with really just explaining the way we think and the way in which we work. We are a partner company at heart, and so we have no end-to-end solutions. Our role really is to provide the underlying platforms and support for our partners to build solutions on, for our customers who have that technical capability. So on the left-hand side, you've got the things, you've got information coming in, IoT devices, edge modules, Azure Sphere. And then in the middle, you've got this still quite complicated lot of stuff. And then on the right-hand side, you've got ways you can visualize it, the ways you can integrate it into third-party applications, such as CRM systems, such as HR systems, etc. So one of the first things we've gone, and not one of the first things we've got, one of the solutions we have to clarify this is we have a platform called Azure IoT Central. IoT Central is effectively a SaaS solution. It's software as a service. You buy it, you put data into it, you get insights out of it. It's a very, very easy way to get started. And it's been incredibly popular with our customers and with our partners alike because of its simplicity, just because it just works. Now, if you're looking at a slightly more complicated scenario of a digital twin, how do we do that? The biggest challenge around digital twins has been building those relationships between the various elements of a building. In this instance, clearly, it could be a car, it could be a mine, it could be a factory, it could be agriculture, it could be anything. But the whole concept of a digital twin, creating a twin of the physical world, whether it's to do with things, systems, whether it's to do with context and relationships, or whether it's to do with people and processes and experiences, it's really being able to bring all that together. And the complexity has always been, how do you relate that, I don't know, that tap, or as Americans would say, that faucet, to that sink, to that flushometric unit, to that, or how do you relate that human being coming into a place, their relationship with that location, what they want to do, who they're meeting, etc., etc. So again, IoT Central is our software as a software as a solution, and Digital Twins is our developer as a solution. All right, and so it's a developer platform. What that means is you could create an instance of Azure Digital Twins tomorrow. It's very easy. You just go to Azure and you just create one. It will do nothing for you. Clearly, you have to have developers actually develop the solution on top of it. But what it has at its heart is this ability to actually model the relationships between the data sources. And we've created an entire new language called Digital Twins Definition Language. It's open source, as you'd expect from Microsoft these days. And it enables developers to build those relationships so much more quickly, so much more easily than they used to be able to do in the past. And what that's done, and what we've seen, is has massively reduced the time it takes for our partners to bring solutions to market, and hugely reduced the amount of time and cost for customers to actually create a digital twin of their buildings, of their campus, of their city, of their environment. In simple terms, it looks like this. On the left-hand side, there's stuff coming in, people, places, data being ingested into the digital twin, series of ideas around how you analyze that, whether you need to do it immediately, whether you want to do it longer term. So a good example of that is room booking. Clearly, if you want to be able to book a room, you need to know what's happening there and then, and etc. So you need to be able to do that straight away. But if you want to look at utilization over a longer period of time, clearly you want to do some colder or warmer analytics on that data to kind of really understand how you're using that space. It also enables you to integrate with other business applications, and of course it lets you visualize it, use mixed reality, etc. And a very important part of this is our partner ecosystem. Hopefully you'll recognize most of the names on this, but maybe you won't, and that's not a bad thing. Our partner ecosystem, this is quite Eurocentric, to be honest. It wouldn't be that different in the US or Asia, but there are some European companies in there. When we talk about a partner ecosystem, what you got to remember is Microsoft is a partner company at heart. 95% of Microsoft revenue comes through partner. Just let that sink in. 95% of Microsoft revenue comes through partner. So partnering is in our DNA. So when we talk about partner, it's not just some shallow relationship. It is a deep relationship. So if you talk to me about Johnson Controls, I know exactly about, well, not exactly, I've got a really good idea about OpenBlue, exactly what it does, how it was developed. Schneider Electric, again, the EcoStruxure range. Forge from Honeywell, MindSphere from Siemens. We have deep technical and commercial relationships. And what that means is, no matter who the customer is, we've got a partner out there that can deliver it. No matter whether it's someone who just wants a large systems integrator like Infosys or NTT or L&T at the bottom there to just come in and deliver it, or whether you're already working with the Honeywells of the world, the Siemens of the world, the Bosch, the Johnson Controls, the Schneider Electrics, the ABBs, or if in fact you've got that capability in-house and you just need a bit of help with someone like Elasticloud or Codit or Kainos. So we've got this really rich partner ecosystem of both technical relationship and a commercial relationship. So in summary, we've been very, very careful and intentional about our involvement in smart buildings and places. We don't pretend to do anything we're not. We're focused very much on our strengths, and we're able to deliver through our partner ecosystem, which, as you can see, is very extensive. There you go. I think that's it, isn't it? 15 minutes and 5 Q&A.
Absolutely. Bang on, David. Thank you very much. So we haven't had a large number of questions through yet. So what I'm going to do is just ask you one question for now and then save a few later for the Q&A session. So the first question that was asked was around, okay, we've got some good smart solutions coming out for smart business buildings, but what about home dwellings, recognizing that the smart working network is a lot around how do we support people working from home? Can you see there being sort of changes in that side of things as well?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the if I was to go back to the slide that showed the various elements of the sort of scenarios, getting right into what we're actually delivering, they're as relevant to domestic and residential buildings as they are to any other buildings. It's one of my mantras is, to upset people, is a building's a building's a building's a building. And frankly, if you're running a hospital or you're running an airport or you're running a multi-tenanted apartment block, you're still worried about the energy costs. You're still worried about sustainability. You're still worried about access control. You're still worried about space utilization. You're still worried about the lobby experience. All that's different is your priority. So actually, exactly the same technologies that enable you to do this in an office building are exactly the same technologies with maybe different sensors, maybe a little bit of different kind of processing at the other end, but the same principles that you apply to any kind of building. And so while I've talked mainly about offices, absolutely the same technology, the same capabilities apply to residential buildings, and I have worked on a number of residential building projects.
Great, thanks, David. I'm going to give you one more very specific one in your area, so we'll cover it now rather than in the Q&A. And the questions come from Fred, and he says, what do you do to help corporate real estate and facilities management make their data interoperable with the BIM data of architects and builders?
Yeah, we work very closely with Autodesk and Bentley, for example. Bentley are one of our biggest partners. If you go online, look at Bentley iTwin, that's built on Microsoft Azure Digital Twins. So when we're looking at BIM data, yeah, absolutely. The easy integration or the easy ingestion of that data into Azure Digital Twins and into our platforms is something that we've worked extremely hard on, and we can do, basically. So if you think about the way in which you might build up a digital twin, the building information model information is merely, from our perspective, just one layer. That would give you, in some ways, the kind of the basic framework that enables you to do that. And then what we're then able to do is bring in additional layers of information, maybe around the plumbing, maybe around the heating and ventilation systems, maybe around where the desks are, maybe around where other office furniture is, maybe where the human beings are. I've got one customer that's put all their artwork as another layer because they've realized that their art sitting in one place is stale, and they want to be able to move it around, but they also want to asset track it. So if you're thinking about how from a facilities management perspective, again, you see one of the logos on there was CBRE, working very closely with them, and our value is around helping experts in the FM industry, whether it be hard or soft, understand the value of their data and really partnering with them, getting rid of this stupid vendor and supplier language, really partnering with them and saying, hey, this is what we do in manufacturing, so why don't you do something similar around the buildings that you're responsible for, or the buildings that you own?
Okay, thank you very much, David. Now you'll see there's more questions coming through, but you've got a little while to think about answers to those, because at this point we're going to move on to our next speaker, and we'll come back, if we may, in the Q&A, please, David.
Sure.
So I'm going to welcome now Jack Harvey-Clark, who is the CEO of Apex Acoustics, and Jack's going to talk to us about how you optimize your offices for ideal, noise minimization and the use of the building. So without further introduction, I'm going to hand over now to Jack Harvey-Clark, and I'll make you a presenter. Here we go.
Great. How's that? Can you see me and hear my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me here as well. And it was great to hear what you had to say first, David, because lots of what I can say sits within a similar context. So I'm going to be talking about this new standard for acoustic quality of open office spaces, ISO 22955, and also creating a workplace to love. Because if you don't create a workplace to love, nobody will want to come back, as you mentioned, David. So my name is Jack Harvey-Clark. I've been an acoustic consultant for 20 years, and I've been designing open plan offices for about more than 10 years now. And I was on the ISO committee that wrote this standard. So part of it's my fault. Right. So what is in this? What does this standard offer us that we didn't have? So the standard aims to be accessible and useful to people at all levels, if you like, all the stakeholders within an open plan office design and use. So it enables specification. And by that, I mean acoustic performance specification. So clients can simply point to this standard and say, I would like my office, my fit out designed in accordance with this standard, and I'll explain what the implications of that will be. It helps in the planning of the office. This is a major part that often isn't done acoustically or hasn't traditionally been done acoustically. And I'll explain and show why that's important. The design, what I think about the detailed design is what people often think of as the acoustic design. So the interior designer works out a plan and says, can you do the acoustics for that? And if you, well, by the end of this small talk, hopefully you'll realize that's much too late to start thinking about the acoustics if you want good outcomes. And then there's the operation. There's things in this standard that can help you improve the acoustic conditions of an office in use. Because if you think of an office as a tool, then you need to learn how to use that. An organization needs to learn how to use it effectively. That changes and develops with time. So there's a few tools in here to help people do that without changing the fabric of the office. In a previous world, of course, we knew that noise has for a long time been one of the biggest environmental problems in offices. And Leesman and other big surveys have shown that it's one of the most common challenges. And globally, satisfaction with noise levels in offices is frighteningly low. It's one of the most difficult challenges for organizations, even with high-performing offices, to score well in. So what are the noise problems? Well, the biggest problem is speech that you don't want to hear. So we can't close our ears. We can't look away from sound. So if we hear speech, our brains find it, we have to put a lot of effort in to not process that speech. So it interferes with our own internal conversation. So it's distracting and annoying. So unwanted speech is the biggest problem in open plan offices. Other sources of noise that are problems are telephones ringing, people passing by, noise from machines such as printers or air conditioning, ventilation, or even the sound of a particular colleague are the sorts of things that usually get mentioned as noise problems. How can we design in a holistic manner to achieve good acoustic conditions then? This standard, which is a BS ISO, it's not an EN, was developed from the French standard. So that was published in 2016, I think, and that remains in France. So the ISO is probably a step forwards from the French standard. So I guess they will probably adopt it in France. But in lots of other European countries, they already have standards or guidelines for the fit out of open plan offices, for the acoustic performance of that. So the German VDI is a classification system, so you can go for class A, B, or C, for example. The Finnish have this in their building regulations, I believe, in the offices. Similarly, Sweden has a national standard, and they have standards in other countries too. So in those countries, they might well not adopt this standard because it will conflict with their own national standards. But we didn't have anything in the UK. We had very, very scant information. So in the UK, nobody really has known where to go for a good source of information on acoustic planning for fit out. What this standard does is it takes an occupant-centric view of the issues and then the solutions to those issues. And it does this by considering the activity. So it's arranged around, at its core, 3 different space types with activities associated with them. So the first activity is a contact center or a call center, where the main part of the activity is talking on a telephone to people outside the office. The second is an office or space for collaborative work, where the main communication is with people at nearby workstations. And the third is for individual work. So obviously the second and third of those categories don't usually exist as a complete activity across a floor plate. And most offices are used for a combination of activities. So there's a section in this on combining activities across the floor plate. The way that the standard does this is through tables that look like this. So they describe 3 different interactions, starting at the workstation and then looking at between workstations and then across the floor plate. And for each of these, they describe acoustic challenges and describe the criteria. And there's either target values or required values to be achieved. In this example, for a contact center, it looks like is described like this. And between workstations, there's a certain attenuation. So I'll describe what these things mean. So there's just, at the workstation, there's just a target value for ambient noise in the office in use. So target means you don't have to achieve it to comply with the standard, but that's there for people to measure in use and benchmark their office against. But the required values you have to achieve if you want to claim compliance with the standard. On the floor plate, so the numbers that are really going to drive the design are these ones down here, and I'll describe what they mean in a minute. thinking about those three core space types, contact center, collaborative work, or individual work, which are the basis of the standard, there's three different noise levels as targets, and these are ambitious noise levels. This is a good standard. This isn't minimum standards. And some European countries like Germany has a labour law that actually limits noise levels in open plan offices to 56 dBA for people's health and well-being. So that's a concept which is a long way away, I think, from health and safety in the UK. I think France is going that way as well. They're the target levels. The required levels. So this in situ attenuation, what these numbers mean is that for a contact center or for offices for individual work, a value of greater than 6 dB means you need a screen height of 1.3 meters from the floor between desks. So this is, I think, quite a heavy-handed way of putting in an acoustic specification, which has a very direct construction implication, if you like. For collaborative work, obviously, you need to talk to people. So being less than 4 means the screen has to be lower between workstations so that you can talk to people. The preparation time is in there, but it shouldn't really be because it doesn't really apply to open plan office spaces. So the last two ones are these numbers, the spatial decay of speech. So this describes the rate at which speech decreases in level as you move away from a person talking. So a bigger number means speech decays more quickly. So you would think that then it would be, if it's at a lower level, it's going to be less intelligible. If you can't hear it, it's going to be less distracting. But the rate at which speech decays doesn't tell you how loud it is at any point unless you know how loud it is at one point. So the speech level at 4 meters, the LPAS 4M, tells you that. How loud is speech with a normal spectrum at 4 meters? So you get these two numbers by taking a series of measurements across the floor plate and looking at the slope and the value at 4 meters. What these numbers mean, it depends on the size of the office. Within a large office with a typical ceiling height, these, and if you had just rows of typical desks, which you probably won't have in a smart working environment anyway, but if you did have that, you'd be looking at screen heights of somewhere between 1.3 and maybe 1.7 or even 1.8 meters to achieve these values. So these mean, and they definitely mean that when you're seated and you look around, you can't see other people who are speaking very much at all. Not necessarily no one, but the screens need to be such that they interfere the line of sight between people consistently. So it's definitely a not very open plan office. It's different in a smaller office or a bigger office. You have to do different things to achieve these numbers. So the first question is, well, does the evidence support these numbers? How do these give good levels of acoustic satisfaction? So on this chart, we've got people who are highly disturbed by noise on this axis. And here we've got spatial decay of speech up here. So each one of these dots is from a study in an office where they did questionnaires and asked people about their experience with noise and did a measurement campaign when there was no one in there to see how speech or sound decays across the office. So this is a collection of 15 years of research of the Finnish team who've done a lot of work to drive this, and also quite a few years of a German team with the triangles in here. And here is the evidence that the spatial decay of speech is not controlled. It's actually the other way around, isn't it? Is that people who are highly disturbed by noise, there's no correlation with the spatial decay of speech. So the evidence really is that we shouldn't be using that as a predictor of satisfaction. With the other one though, the speech level at 4 meters, there is some correlation. So if we look at the dark line here, so this, if we designed to 20% of people being highly disturbed by noise, we'd come out with a level of 47, which was the number in 2 out of 3 of the space categories. So this looks like about the right number. But then you'd ask, if you design to this level, will you get, is that going to achieve a good control of disturbance by noise? So if you look at the data that you get here, where you've achieved 47 dB, in one of those offices, 60% of people are still saying they're highly disturbed by noise. So it's definitely not the only thing. I mean, there is a correlation there, but it's not sufficient by itself. And I'm going to suggest it's not even actually the most important thing, because one of the reasons is this takes no account of density at all. But actually, one of the things that's most important for acoustic satisfaction is the acoustic space planning. And this is where the standard can help, because it introduces a method for doing this systematically. So if we think about a space that might suit smart working, for example, how much acoustic protection do we need from one casual space to another casual space, or between this type of setting and a focus desk or an open plan desk and a focus booth, for example? How much protection do we need between all these different places? Because it's not all the same. So this was one of my contributions to the standard, was develop a matrix and a method for doing this systematically. So we can think of different types of spaces that we can classify in different ways, with increasing sound emission as we go up this side, and receptor spaces that have increasing sensitivity. So we can create a matrix of requirements for acoustic protection from one type of source place to a different type of receiving place, and the amount of protection they need. So we've won a few awards for inventing this method, actually, and it's written into the standard now, which is very nice to see. And so we can put numbers on all these things and consider about the context of them. So the standard suggests this as a method, but it doesn't give you any particular criteria to use. And it's good that it doesn't, because there's definitely not evidence yet as to what type of criteria we need. And one of the reasons for this is it depends so much on the context. If people have assigned desks, there's nothing they can do about an annoying noise. So in general, they need greater protection from noise. In a smart working environment where people are much more likely to be able to choose where they work, they don't need as much protection because they can find somewhere else. So the values that you need depend on the context of the environment and the workplace strategy to begin with. There's 7 annexes that have got some useful information in. So you don't need these to say you comply with the standard, but they offer some information that can be useful. So process flowcharts point to the outline the process of designing an office and point you to different parts of the standard that can be useful at different stages. Then there's 3 annexes in here that are for the operation of the office. So there's one on measuring the noise in use. There's an acoustic comfort survey. So this is very useful for diagnosing problems in offices, because people often don't complain even when there are problems. And you can identify what the noise issues are and do something about them without changing the fabric of the office at all. One of the things that could come out of that is a collective use etiquette, and there's an example of one of those in the standard. So people in the office agreeing how they should behave in general or in different areas of the office, or how they're going to use different areas of the office. And that can give people a sense of control over their office and the sound environment, which is central for improving their acoustic satisfaction. Masking systems are internationally very controversial, in that some countries in Europe don't use these at all. They've tried them, don't like them, turn them off, throw them away, would never use them again. America, for example, I don't think you would build an open plan office without one. So, and there is a trade-off. So I'm talking about anonymous noise here, really, rather than the soundscaping in terms of playing biophilic sounds or things like that. So that's a separate, I think about that as a separate type of thing compared to sound masking. Sound masking is playing background anonymous noise that sounds like a ventilation system or something like that. So that speech that you hear is less intelligible because it's masked by the background noise. So there's going to be a balance between it being effective, so it needs to be louder to be more effective, but the louder it is, the more annoying it is for more people. And that's a balance. If you ask people what sort of sounds they like, most people like to listen to their own music. And of course, not everybody can do that unless they're wearing headphones. And people think they least want to hear technical noise. But overall, people want control. Control is the most important thing. And I think there has been a lack of evidence in the literature about how important control is for acoustic satisfaction. And this is a case study that I've published recently, and they're going to take further as well. So this is an organization where they started implementing smart working principles back in 2016. So I don't know where that was on the timeline of smart working. And they did lots of questionnaires with their employees, and their satisfaction with the environment went up in the new floor plates, which they designed for with smart working in mind. So big increases in satisfaction. So how did they achieve this? If we benchmark it first of all against the Leesman global scores, you can see the lighting and thermal comfort started off exactly on the global benchmarks, but then improved significantly. The acoustics people were already very happy with. And if we even look at the Leesman Plus, so this is the highest performing workplaces. So the average score for acoustic satisfaction is just 45%, and they've got 83% satisfaction with the acoustics here. So what did they do? Well, they transformed the office from, this was the traditional layout with rows of desks perpendicular to the window, assigned desks, and they redesigned it. But they didn't change the lighting. They didn't change the heating, the ventilation, the air conditioning. And we measured the acoustics in all sorts of different ways. And I can say they didn't change the acoustics. But overall, the acoustic conditions are the same. You might not imagine that, but they are. So those increases in satisfaction are entirely down to the control you've given people. So in a smart working environment, I think you start with a natural advantage of giving people control. I think this ISO standard offers big opportunities for people to improve acoustic conditions with new methods and clear design goals. But there's also a risk that if you just adopt it without questioning it, it would have design implications that might be at odds with how you want to design things. But it does set out what you might need to do to protect people acoustically. I'm sure you know this, you need to create a workplace that's going to be successful. The process you go through is almost as important as the design. You need to find out what people need and take those acoustic needs seriously. So here's another picture from that workplace that's been so acoustically successful. So I would prioritize control. You've already done that. And the next most important thing is the acoustic space planning. And finally is the detail of the room acoustic design. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Jack. And I really love that idea, you know, a workplace to love. Why else would people want to go back to the office? People have got used to their own quiet environments. And I must say, when we did a workforce survey, we found one of the main reasons people liked working from home was fewer distractions, you know, ability to focus, productivity.
Which is exactly what the Great Home Working experiment has shown us, is that most, on average, people's homes are much better suited to their productive work than the office, which is a terrible indictment of the whole office design industry.
Exactly. So big question about how we get them back. Absolutely. Yes. Well, thank you for the insights. What we'll do is we'll come back and cover any questions from your section when we move to the open Q&A in about 15, 20 minutes time. But I'd now like to welcome Kasia. So Kasia Garval works for, like I say, Ringer Axel Springer, a publishing house, large publishing house in Poland. We've previously heard from Mark Decan, their CEO. And today we're going to hear from Kasia around communications and how they've kept that going, how they've kept the sense of energy in some remote events that they've been running. So Kasia, if I can encourage you to turn your webcam on, and then I will put a spotlight on it.
I have my camera on.
There we go, lovely. You've just come up on Spotlight as well. So if you're okay to share your content, and yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, just referring to Jack, you know, when you have 4 children in your house, the acoustic should be really better than I had. So if I can use from your experience, it would be great, because when school were closed in Poland, you know, it was really tough working from home. But let's talk about communication. I think it's more, let's say, when we use computer wording, you talked more mostly about, let's say, hardware, and communication is about software within the company. So I'm Katarzyna Gaweł, and I'm responsible for internal communication and engagement in Linia Acoustics Polska. And I would like to talk about how to get closer while being apart, not only during pandemic, but also when we work remotely or half remotely, half from home. I would also like you, oh my God, what's okay, now it's changing. I would also like you to meet my communication team, because they help me in a daily basis work, because internal communication is a really huge topic. So Carolina is my boss, Matilda deals with B2B communication, Kinga brand communication, Agnieszka external communication, Małgorzata tech communication, Krzysztof social media, Alexandra Chmielewska helps me in my work, and I'm responsible, as I said, for internal communication. So, and we, oh, sorry, something, oh, okay. And we all represent Linia Acoustics Polska, the company that reaches 23 million users. We have 30 brands, and we employ 1,800 people. And for all of these people, like 4 years ago, because I've been working for the company, I'm working for the company for the last 5 years, and 4 years ago, we introduced employees meetings roadmap, as you can see on the slide. So we had, for the whole year, we had like 7 meetings. We had carnival parties, we had town halls, so meetings with the management board. We had people awards once a year. This is the gala where we awarded the best projects, the best people, the best achievements. And at the end of the year, we had also Christmas parties. And we also faced many challenges, like equality, because let's say equal access to the information was really tough when you have people spread it all over the Poland. So it was really tough, for instance, to organize this town hall meeting, so meeting with the management board, when everyone is supposed to be able to ask a question to the management board, and some of the people were in the same room as, let's say, with the management board, and others were in different locations, so live streamed it, but the access to the information was not equal those times. The strategy challenge we faced, it was that our people said that they are not able to link their individual goals to the strategic goals, so they don't see their contribution to the strategy that we would like to implement and go with. The product challenge was that, as I said, we have 30 brands, as you can see. So, and many people, didn't know all the brands that we have in our portfolio, and the products that the brands represents were, of course, there are many more. So it was quite difficult for our people to remember all these products and all those brands. And engagement, this is a core goal of the communication, to raise the engagement all the time, so it's pretty obvious. But the new challenge that came during the pandemic was also dealing with employees' emotions and taking care of relations. So we had really a few challenges during the pandemic and before the pandemic. So we sat down also with Mark Dekan, so our CEO, with the communication team, and we were thinking, what can we do now when we are when we face these challenges, and we are still, when we are apart and working from homes. So we thought, how about gathering people around a virtual campfire? So what about creating a platform where our people still can meet, talk, and just maintain their relations. And in June 2020, so last year, we introduced special, as we call it, RASP live format, so Linia Acoustics Polska live formats. And very important thing that is that we blocked the calendars of our employees every Wednesday at 2 p.m. so they know exactly that they can expect something happen every Wednesday at 2 p.m. And we have different kind of formats here. So in place of 7 meetings that we had in previous years, from June 2020 to June 2021 this year, we had like 45 meetings that gather around between 200 and 1,200 people, depending on the format, of course. And let me get into details. So town hall is a format when before the pandemic we had it, but it was on a quarterly basis. So every quarter the management board meet all the employees and answered all of the questions. Now we meet every month. So every month on Teams live events, because we use Teams, Microsoft Teams in our company. So on Teams live events, we meet and every employee can ask any question to the management board. Then we have CopyWith. We are a media tech company, so we have an access to many famous people, celebrities, politicians, sports people. So we thought maybe we should just organize meetings with those people we have access to, and give our people possibility to meet them and ask them questions, even private ones, because there are the meetings are only internal, so we don't stream it anywhere. We don't stream it externally. So this way, our employees can meet any celebrity we have an access. We have contact with. Rasparena is a format that we answer the challenge connected with products, knowing our portfolio, because here we ask our teams to present the products they are working on. So they present the product, failures, successes, all information connected with developing the products that we have. RasFlow is more easygoing, let's say, maybe. So here our employees can gain new skills. We talk here about burnout, for instance, or depression, or dealing with emotions, or building relations, about communication. We had also yoga class, for instance, during this RasFlow format. So this is more informal meeting for our employees, and here we ask coaches or other experts to meet and just share their knowledge with us. And CEO Live, this is a platform for our CEO. So here Mark can invite anyone he wants to interview or talk to. And here also every quarter he asks the whole management board to join him and present the strategy. So in January we present the strategy for the following year, and then every quarter they present how the strategy is implemented. And I'm really proud that after introducing this format, in the last survey, 70% of our employees said that finally they see connection with the individual goals, so they can really contribute to our strategy. And this is this new employees meetings roadmap. And previously I said also that we had this People Awards Gala once a year, where we appreciated our people, the best achievements, the best projects. So even when the pandemic was, we couldn't imagine not having this gala. But it was also a real challenge for us not to meet in person, not to have fun with DJ drinks and all the stuff that usually you do at the party. So it was really tough not to just take the content from the offline gala and put it to the online version. We had to come up with a new idea. So we developed a home edition, People Awards Home Edition. And it was also a huge success, because it was 3 hours online event. We asked 65 guests to join us online, and we had 1,200 attendees. So it's the same number that we usually have on offline events. We had also after party. Before the gala, we sent our people 1,400 packages, so they found there, something to drink, something to eat, and they were supposed to open it during the gala, and they did, and they shared even the pictures of opening the packages and having fun with us on social media. So we had a lot of buzz on social media done by our employees. They also shared the pictures on Teams because we had special Teams channel for our employees to share the pictures, how they have fun during the gala. And here, this is also funny because a good party, we say that we should end a good party with a breakfast. So usually at the People Awards at 6 a.m. we have scrambled eggs, and here, as you can see, all of the employees done by themselves their scrambled eggs and just shared with us the pictures. Okay, so that's pretty all that we did during the last year and this year, but what about the results? So we have many data because we do now a lot of surveys among employees, but the most important data you can see on the slide. So in 2019, we had an engagement level at 43%. In 2021, so this year, it's 10 percentage points higher, so we have 53%, so it's a huge success for us. And last year we also did a Great Place to Work survey when our 72% of our employees said that Rynie Axel Springer Polska is a great place to work. And as I mentioned, also from this survey, we found out that 70% of our people understand the connection between their individual goals and strategic ones. And we were also awarded for this People Award. So we got 2 awards and we are waiting for more. And I would love really to give you a separate presentation about People Awards because the gala itself was a huge communication project. But let me play you a short 1-minute video just to give you the feeling of the gala. It's partly in Polish, so sorry for that, but I think that you will get the emotions, and this is the most important from the gala. Oh, sorry.
Startuj! Już? Wygląda na to, że chyba jesteśmy gotowi.
Czołem dziewczyny, to ja, zwarty i gotowy.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to People Awards 2020. Hello, Alek, Zizek, and Jovan. Great guys that you are joining us here from home.
I Anna Bazyluk! I to jest tylko tu niewiarygodna sprawa.
Ania to marka sama w sobie.
Bardzo serdecznie dziękuję.
Serce mi wali tak jak to tutaj.
Bardzo gratulujemy nagrody.
The team. Zespół wideo.
Pomimo skrajnie trudnych warunków pedał gazu pozostawał dociśnięty do podłogi.
Dziękuję.
Mario, to ja, Szymon, zobacz dział wideo, jak mnie filmuje, jak wręczam ci oto nagrodę. Idź w kierunku szarych drzwi. Jakiś kapelusznik do ciebie, ktoś w kapeluszu.
Zapiera mi dech, nie wiem co mam powiedzieć.
Printowo-online'owa współpraca.
Serdecznie gratuluję zwycięzcom People Awards.
Dziękuję bardzo za ten rok.
Okay, that's all from my side. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Kazia. And in just a moment, I'm going to invite our other speakers back, as well as Philip van Hoot from the Smart Working Network, who's going to help us answer some of the questions to the panel. Just before we do that, there are a couple of questions that have come through. So one of the questions, interesting observation, saying that you guys have got access to a load of media tech, so you can do really flashy things with cameras and lights and everything. But are there some really key learnings and takeaways for those of us who may not have those resources, but want to do something virtual within our organizations?
Yeah, sure. Well, as I said, we use Microsoft Teams, so there are a lot of possibilities in Microsoft Teams. So now we are able even to produce by ourselves an event for up to 10,000 people. So just use Microsoft Teams live events, for instance, and you can set different roles there. You can be a producer, you can be a speaker, you can be just attendee. So we only use now Microsoft Teams to organize all of the events that was presented on my presentation.
Nice. And I saw your use of social media as well. So I guess, again, you could be using Facebook if you wanted, or WhatsApp chat, and there's lots of options available, and even Slido and things like that to do polling.
Not at all, because we are a media company and the political situation in Poland, it's quite tough. So we have to be very safe when it goes about leak of the information, and Teams, Microsoft Teams are very secure for us. That's why we are using mainly Teams, not Facebook, YouTube, or other tools to live stream our events. So
very
we
good.
have to be really, really careful.
I'm sure fellow panelist here, David Williams, will be delighted to hear the Microsoft credentials there and your choice of tools. So what I'm going to do now is welcome to the stage our other presenters and speakers today. So I'm going to add spotlights, and if David, if you want to come turn your video on as well, please. Lovely, I can see you there, thank you. And Jack as well, please, if you would. That's great. So I've added spotlights to you all. So at this point in time, we now ask the audience for any open questions to be placed into the chat. And meanwhile, I will continue to ask a few questions that have come in over time. Sometimes people send things directly to me. I'll ask those of the relevant panelists as well, just while we're waiting for any other open questions. So Kasia, another one for you while we're on the topic of your events. What were the biggest learning points for you? Clearly, it was very successful, but were there any lessons learned or things that you do differently if you're doing it again?
Yeah, sure. Every crisis can be also, sometimes a chance to learn something new. So now we know that many events like town halls, for instance, we will continue to do remotely because before pandemic, it cost us a lot of time and money. And now it cost us only a time of my work, for instance, just to organize it. So one of the key learnings is that technology is a crucial part of communication. The other is that I have another goal regarding communication. This is dealing with people's emotions. This is really because communications before pandemic was mainly about informing, supporting, engaging. But now it's mainly about dealing the emotions. So and one more is when you start doing something in communication, you have to do it regularly. So the frequency really matters. That's why we have fixed time this Wednesday, 2 p.m. And it's really convenient for our people that they know that they should block this time.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for sharing so openly all your lessons learned and what you've done for your organisation. Quite inspiring. I wouldn't say we've done anything close to that, but then again, I also admired the carnival outfits that some of your guys were wearing in the earlier pictures. So you've obviously been quite wacky with your events in the past as well.
Yeah.
So some questions to the overall panelists then. I'm going to broaden Jenny's question from earlier. It was asked to David, and David actually sent a link to a report, which is really helpful. Thanks, David. It's good to have resources. So Jenny's asking, and this might apply to any of us here, what digital transformation is in the pipeline that will support hybrid or dispersed smarter working? So folks, what digital transformation or tools perhaps are in the pipeline that will support smart working?
Yeah, I'm happy to have a first go at that, as you'd expect from Microsoft as a productivity company. Now, so clearly, from a purely digital perspective, there are, the tools that are available now, such as Teams, such as Outlook, et cetera, do allow you to do that remote working. But I think if you're looking into the future, then clearly I'm going to talk about Microsoft technologies. If you search for Microsoft Mesh, for example, what Microsoft Mesh basically is kind of the next generation of virtual meeting rooms, which enables you effectively to bring together to improve the kind of experience. Because you know what it's like. I mean, I've worked looking at this 30-inch screen for the last 18 months, and frankly, I hate it. So what can you do to kind of make it more, what can you do to make it more interactive? I mean, one of the things I've learned, for example, is I've had to move my hands up here when I talk because I gesticulate quite a lot, but there's no point me doing it down here. So I have to do it up here. So it's just things like that. But if you look at Mesh, what it's looking to doing is it's looking to bring much more high quality visualization of human beings, so you can see their reactions much better, better acoustics, so that their voice actually comes from maybe where they are on the screen, so it actually feels like that person's talking to you rather than a speaker over here and a human being looking at you here. So yeah, there's things like that that just make it, that just try and improve that capability. Now clearly, you know, Horizon 3 out in Dreamland, then it's all holographics, etc., etc. And we know the technology's there to create holographics, but just realistically, the cost at the moment of implementing that in any scale really doesn't make sense. What I would say, though, which might sound slightly counterintuitive from somebody who works for Microsoft, is actually the digital side of things is in some ways the least important. You know, we talk about people, places, and processes just because it's 3 Ps, but no, seriously, and you know, as we've heard already, you know, hybrid working is a state of mind. Hybrid working is enabled by good management, by good leadership. And so many, you know, you hear these terrible stories, and I won't mention the companies' names because we've read them, you know, some idiots, particularly in the financial services industry, going, we want you back in the office. Why? Because you made these really stupid decisions, taking out 20-year loans on some vanity building in the middle of Canary Wharf or London or in New York. You know, sorry guys and girls, grow up. You know, that's not the environment people want to work for you, and making statements like that just makes you look frankly silly against your competitors. So I think there is an empowerment of management, there is an empowerment of leadership that needs to be given to let people actually work where they're best suited. And a great point that Jack made around, actually, you know, we at Microsoft, have we really suffered any great reduction in productivity? Yes, we have in some areas, clearly in team environments, working environments we have, but as individuals, debatable. There's been spots and spats all over the place. So I do think it's important to think about the digitization of things, but actually the people and the places are just important as the processes where we would tend to put digitization.
Great, thanks, David. And interesting, you mentioned there the importance of smart leadership, because that is our topic in September. So do encourage everyone to come along. We've got some great speakers on that. We'll cover in a moment. Jack, you may have a perspective as well on what technologies in the pipeline. On mute, I think, Jack. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry. Yes, and I'd actually like to be a bit controversial and contradict you to a certain extent, David, because I think people have been looking at the value of the in-person experience, and lots of companies have been talking about what they miss and what they lose about having no in-person experience at all. And there was a little bit of evidence for this emerging, and one of these was from a financial services company. I think it was a bank in New York.
They're not all bad.
So I completely share your thing. You know, say having a diktat about what people must do obviously seems like a bad idea, doesn't it? But this was an office where they did keep going into the office through the pandemic, and their performance as a bank about that office outperformed all the other offices where everybody had gone home. So the technology supported them all working remotely, but they didn't work as effectively overall, and where they had a measurable outcome. So I think, and the other side of this acoustically is, as you mentioned as well, is what we don't get at the minute with remote working is that sense of presence. And our hearing gives us so many dimensions of presence. As you mentioned, where's the sound coming from, moving sounds, what we detect. You know, subconsciously, we get so much information through our ears that's all lost when it comes out of a speaker and our voice goes back into a microphone. And they are exactly the tools. You mentioned some of the things that you're doing, and I'd say lots of the other big tech companies are working very hard on this to make the experience for people who aren't in the room much better, so that we will get to a point where meetings with remote people, you have a much greater sense of presence. You're not disadvantaged if you're not actually in the room to the extent that you are now.
Thank you. And Philip.
Yeah, I would like to add that I've gone back to vintage technology. I remember vividly for about a decade that I was using a lot of audio calls, just plain voice calls. I think there comes a point in time where you said, I've had enough sitting behind a screen, no matter what size the screen is. And I have very good souvenirs of being into conference calls or even one-on-one calls with a walk and just having a headset on and talking to people and just have their voices in my head. I don't need to see their faces. friends all the time, particularly the people that we've been working with all the time. So go outside, go for a walk, have a call with people, forget about all these screens, forget about sitting behind all these computers.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for all your views. I've got a question coming from Jen. Jen is asking, this one's for Jack to begin with. Jack, do you think the standards you talked about go far enough? Were there any factors you were hoping would be included but aren't? And then, for example, you mentioned Germany and France taking a stronger approach to defining maximum noise levels.
Yes, that's from an occupational health perspective in those countries. I don't think an international standard definitely couldn't do that because it would come up against local laws. So it definitely couldn't take that approach. So where I think the standard falls short, if you like, is around the other aspects that contribute to acoustic satisfaction. That it's not very much of it is about the actual design of the room. And there's more evidence emerging. I mentioned the factor of density. It's probably obvious to everybody that the more people you put in the space, the louder it's going to be, the more distracting it's going to be. Some people can cope with that. Some people like a lively atmosphere and go to a cafe to do their individual work. But there's plenty of people who don't like that and can't cope with it. So density is a big factor that isn't yet in the metrics for acoustics. So that's an omission, if you like. That's not just the fault of the standard. The evidence isn't quite there in the literature to support that, although it seems obvious. And then there's this aspect to control. There's all the softer side of things. There's the personal, what it means to people, the range of acoustic tolerances that people have. There's not really any information about that. I mean, there's a lot more talk about inclusivity in the world. And what about acoustic inclusivity? We don't design buildings in general for acoustic inclusivity. We design them with ramps, so you can get in with a wheelchair, but if you find noisy spaces difficult, we don't design them for you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jack. Jen also had a question around tools and products to help managers and leaders lead and manage. We're actually going to cover those topics in depth in September, and actually Andy sent a link to that session. So I'm going to save that one up our sleeves, but we will certainly cover that. You know, mark my words, we've got loads of content around how to lead a disparate workplace or disparate workforce. A question from Dave W. It's one for Jack, and Jack, I'm hoping this is clear to you. You may need to explain the context again for the rest of the audience. So Dave W is asking, I wonder if you could explain the link between the workplace transformation picture and the controller killer variable. And he says the killer control looks like the workplace transformation has scored in all three areas, although Jack mentioned this might not have been the case. It might need a bit of context behind that one.
Yes, I'll share my screen again.
Thanks.
This was the graph. So this was the results of the surveys. So the pre-showcase, if you like, that's the employee questionnaires on the traditional floor plate before they started making the transformation. And then in September 2016, so the middle one is immediately after they made the transformation. And then this is the grey one is sometime later. And this is the lighting, the acoustics, and the climate. And because the whole transformation just happened, they left the ceiling and the lighting and the floor and the heating, the ventilation. So they didn't change any of the physical environment at all. But so when I talk about control being a killer variable, that's a quote from somebody who in building services, who was looking at what's the most important thing in building services. And they were reporting about how control is, if you like, often a missed opportunity. It's the sense of control is so important for our environmental satisfaction across all areas, even to the extent that the speed with which the facilities management team respond to the complaints you make makes people feel more in control. And control is very closely associated with comfort and comfort with productivity. So that's the purpose of this. And does that make sense, Dave?
It does, yeah, thank you, Jack. And in fact, even if we look at basic psychology, if you're looking at stress factors, lack of control can be a really big stress factor to people. So I can see how that then applies in the acoustic world as well.
Yes, so control is actually an essential thing from a psychology point of view as an outcome in itself for well-being, having a sense of control of your environment before you start thinking about what the factors are.
Absolutely. If you could, thank you. Thanks, Jack. And it was useful to see the slides again. So we had a question out of left field. I'm going to throw this one at Philip because he's well versed in these matters. So Philip, the question is around hand washing. And so Richard is asking, do you think that having clean hands will be important for people returning to work? And he's seen a data platform around how you can, I believe, brand this initiative. I don't know if you've come across it. He says itshandy.com. So you can look up itshandy.com, spelled with an I at the end.
Well, I will definitely look it up. It sounds interesting and funny, but I think no question. Yeah, I think it's now a year and a half that we've been told to stick with proper hand washing, and I'm not sure how many hands people you have been shaking recently with quote unquote semi-strangers, Ben, but I've been very reluctant to do so. So the answer is yes. We'll try and avoid any kind of things spreading unnecessarily. I mean, we just heard the news, right? I mean, everybody is pushing back another 3 to 6 months to return to the office. And unfortunately, it's the quote unquote party poopers that don't want to get vaccinated, which are not going to be allowed in the office. And big companies are starting to say, if you want to come to the office, our beautiful offices, you're going to have to be vaccinated in any case. So yes, let's keep washing hands with or without the app.
Great stuff, great stuff. And I see Dave's posted another sort of confirmation question, and Jack's posted a resource. Jack, I'm just going to open up this discussion again. Sorry to jump topics here, going back to the point we were just discussing around making changes, but people having a sense of control made a big difference. How do we know this is not the Hawthorne effect in play again? I'm sure you'll recognize this term. Back in the 1930s, 1940s, General Electric did some experiments, and they altered the lighting and the temperature and things, and they looked at the impact on the workforce, and they found that actually simply the fact that they were measuring and paying attention to the workers pushed up productivity. So it turned out it didn't matter what they did with the lighting or the heating or whatever, the workers were becoming more productive simply because they were being measured, and they quite liked being part of that experiment. So how do you know it's the control as opposed to the fact suddenly these things are being paid attention to?
I think it's always very difficult. Yes, that's always a problem in all these experiments, in all this data. I mean, and the other thing about this workplace transformation, if you've got a shiny new office, you're bound to like it more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've got to make it compelling, though. I think one of the common themes across all of these presentations, whether it be you're organizing a global event or you're trying to get people back into the office, you have to make people want to do it and want to be there, because you just won't get the engagement. You certainly won't get the commitment if you're forcing people back. And I guess that's one of the pitfalls with the banks dictating when and where people have to work. People aren't going to do it off their own bat, and as a result, the engagement just won't be there. The commitment's not the same.
I think, Ben, the major thing is that flexibility is what is now wanted from people. Yeah. Flexibility, autonomy, call it whatever. I mean, Judgment Day has arrived for facilities managers and their bosses, right? Mm-hmm. People now have the choice to come back to the office. It better be a good office with no exposures and what people think is productive. So will be a lot of people that will not be coming back to poor offices. That's exactly what Leesman said in their service in March. They said at this very moment, the rate card is that 76% of the offices don't deserve going back to.
Companies have got to up their game, haven't they?
Yep.
Absolutely. So we've had a question in advance from Joel, and he's just shared it on the chat. So the question is, how do we balance geographically distributed workforces with supporting local community relationships, or can these be complementary? Interesting question, that. Any thoughts?
Yeah, the answer is co-working spaces.
Small satellite offices distributed around?
Well, I mean, the question is, it's highly unpredictable how many people you're going to have. Also, you need the minimum critical mass, right? I think you're not going to open an office for 12 people, right? So co-working spaces is the answer, but it got to have to be different kind of co-working spaces. Forget all these co-working spaces in urban environments. Think about the closest ranch, if you're the United States or whatever, a nice place in nature by the National Trust somewhere in the UK. That's what's going to be popular, and they're starting to mushroom.
Indeed, and we even see the coffee houses now expanding into the suburbs. There's a lot of that going on in the UK because they recognise that they're not getting the footfall in the centre of towns anymore. So, yeah, any other perspectives on this?
When you think about those co-working spaces, I've been having conversations with banks, and one of their challenges, of course, is around their branch network, which historically they have extensive numbers of buildings that actually increasingly aren't really being used. And so one of the business opportunities that we've spoken to them about is actually turning their banks into co-working locations, because by their very nature, they tend to have good communications into them. By their very nature, they tend to be well distributed around even smaller towns. And actually, you know, if you think about them doing that as a competitor to maybe WeWork or Regus or someone, it can actually be quite a compelling, you know, clearly maybe keep an area of that branch for their own banking reasons, but actually they've normally got pretty good infrastructure that enables you to create, you know, co-working areas in smaller towns that historically the big companies wouldn't be interested about setting up a co-working location.
But David, I agree. But on the other hand, let's not underestimate what it takes to have a proper co-working space, because the essence of a co-working space, I mean, is definitely in community building. I'm not sure that the banks are going to be ready to invest into these things. So I'd recommend that they rather outsource this stuff or give people free tickets to spend a half day in a proper co-working space. That would be my advice to my banker, that he doesn't try to copy what a co-working industry is.
We've had another couple of questions through on acoustics. So I'm going to start these ones with Jack, and they're both on a similar theme. So the first question is, it seems like the open office design is getting ever more headwind. Obviously, organizations have been moving towards open office since, I would say, the early 90s, if not before, and it seems to still be the direction. What's stopping those who specialize in office acoustics advising a much higher proportion of, say, closed work studios or telephone booths? And then one other tangent on this same topic, what about when voice recognition becomes more prominent as a part of the workplace? Won't that cause ever more disruption around noise acoustics? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So the first one, what's to stop acoustic consultants advising on better acoustic conditions? I think that the easy answer to that is facilities managers who do what clients ask them to do. And that tends to be put more people in less space. That's where that's gone. And there's an expectation that people should cope. And I'm always surprised at the extent to which they see the cost saving rather than see the potential value of a better environment for people. And there's lots of times, lots of people have put up, you know, over 10 years, you spend 90% of your costs are salaries and 10% of your cost is your building and maybe 1% is the design. But companies are very loath to spend any money at all on the design, let alone consultants. And there seems to be this desire to reduce costs, which means putting more people in less space. And that's, you know, and if you add into that more teleconferences, that's going to be a complete disaster, isn't it? I mean, that's so I would certainly advise that to people, but they don't always take my advice.
Thank you, Jack. And any other thoughts on that topic anyone else wanted to share?
I think I've practiced already 10 years ago, putting facilities managers in the HR team, so that they have a fresh look at human aspects, ergonomics, and things like that, because you cannot let them continue that way.
Absolutely. So we're now just concluding our session. I'm going to give you an overview of the agenda that we've got for next session. Just before I do that, does anyone from the panel have any closing, I don't know, nugget of advice for our listeners to summarize maybe the themes that you've been discussing today?
I think the main thing, I'm happy to cover that. So I think the main thing is around really bringing together multidisciplinary teams to address these subjects. There was a question earlier in the window around, particularly around facilities management, but frankly, in my experience, it probably applies to both the construction and the built environment companies. A lot of them are very not very tech savvy, shall we say, and actually adopting the kind of ways that digital technology companies work with partnering, as opposed to, and really breaking down this kind of vendor supplier attitude they have, you know, cutting everything to the minimum, seeing how much they can reduce the costs. It actually doesn't work in the longer term. So actively partnering with digital technology companies to help companies that aren't digital technology companies, whether they're providers of FM services, whether they're construction companies, whether they're owners or developers or operators of buildings, it is certainly something that we're encouraging very much. And it's not least because you know, to be honest, they're not. Some of them aren't the most attractive industries to go into, and actually developing a more digital tech educated and savvy profession, you know, I think would very much help them attract and retain some of the newer talent to that industry rather than maybe some of their other industries that look more attractive superficially.
Thanks, David. Yeah, it's clearly a clear theme that's emerged is don't scrimp on the facilities, especially now people have the option of working from home. So thank you very much to all our panelists. I do appreciate all the open views and knowledge sharing that's gone on today. It's always useful, and we've had a real variety of discussions. I can see everyone's appreciated it through the questions being asked. At this point, I'm just going to bring us to a close. But before I do that, a big plug for our session happening in September. Now, this event is going to be massive. I'm a massive fan myself of smart leadership, and we really have got a whole set of keynote speakers to cover this topic. I can't emphasize enough the experience and the knowledge that this group of speakers will bring to this session. They are absolute experts in their field. So we've got Mark Decan, who is the CEO of Ringer Axel Springer. So this is Kazier's organization that we've heard about how they do their events. Obviously very revolutionary, very interesting example. He's been practicing servant leadership for some time, and he wants to talk about leadership as a service and how you empower your team in a smart leadership way. We have Laura Hambley. So Laura again has been speaking on how you do, for example, organizational psychology, how that is applied then to leadership styles. She's an absolute leadership guru. She's going to be covering developing distributed leadership competencies. So what skills and competencies you need to have as a leader and how you develop those. Then we have Anne de Bishop, who is focusing on the well-being side of things. Again, a very renowned speaker, often comes and does keynotes at various events, and will cover how to maintain and encourage employee well-being and how that can help a company's obviously profitability in the long run, but how you have that focus on well-being for the organization. And then finally, on a very similar theme, we have Ilaria, who is our country lead for Italy, being joined by Sylvia, who is now a consultant. She now focuses as well on her new venture, Human Realization, and they're going to have a look at the happiness as a competence and the power of a positive organization where people are enjoying working there. So a very strong theme around smart leadership. It's an open house event, which means it's open to the public, but we will give priority to anyone from the network, and we expect all the places to go. So if you are keen to join, I encourage those who are here today, do sign up early and we'll give you priority spaces. Thanks again to our panelists, and that concludes today's session. See you at the next one. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.